Vitale, Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney in Washington, and Jamil Jaffer, former counsel to both the Senate Foreign Relations and House Intelligence Committees, and founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. So, Ali, this hearing was set to gavel in at the top of the hour. It's set to last about 2 hours. How will it play out?
Yeah, set to last about 2 hours. That's the 2 hours that we can see, but then they're going to go into a more classified portion, and that's probably where, if there are answers to be gotten, that's where they will get them. We know what the issues are on the table. This is an annual hearing, but many of these things are things that have been in the bloodstream here on Capitol Hill for the last few months. Everything from classified documents found at former presidents and vice presidents' homes, up through the Chinese air balloon and the ongoing situation in Ukraine with Russia. All of these set the table for what's likely to be a wide-ranging hearing. But again, senators have even prepped us for this. The idea that there's probably not going to be a lot of information that's going to come out, at least not in the open public portion of this hearing, in large part because we even know that in recent weeks, these intel officials in bipartisan fashion, have been trying to talk with people like the Director of National Intelligence and others to get more information on things like the classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago and at Biden's offices. And they have not been very good or not been very effective at getting that information, in large part because the DNI is trying to be tight-lipped about it because of the ongoing special counsel information. So those are meetings that are happening behind closed doors and not getting lawmakers the information that they want. You got to imagine that it's a continued theme of being tight-lipped when they're actually in public here. But again, once they move into that classified portion after the first 2 hours of questioning, we could see senators get a little bit more information here.
So, Ken, DNI Admiral Haynes will be giving the only opening statement. What will you be listening for then and throughout the day?
So many things, Lindsay. You know, we're actually in a more dangerous world than when I first started covering the intelligence community, and these hearings were dominated by questions about international terrorism and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're in a world where great powers like China and Russia threaten the United States directly. So I want to hear about the intelligence community's assessment on whether China intends to try to seize Taiwan and when and what the U.S. can do about it. And on the big picture in terms of the trajectory of the war in Ukraine, how long this is going to last, how many more billions of dollars is the United States going to have to contribute to this? What's the outcome? And then there are all these intelligence stories in the news that, you know, you can expect that they're going to be asked about. How did Chinese balloons get across U.S. airspace without the U.S. military command in charge of the airspace in North America, without them knowing about it, right? There's been reports in recent days that pro-Ukrainian groups were actually responsible for sabotaging the Nord Stream pipeline. I want to hear what the U.S. intelligence officials say about that. And then on this story about what this awful tragedy in Mexico raises fundamental questions about what the Mexican government is doing about these increasingly powerful drug cartels, which, after all, are fueled by U.S. consumption of drugs, and then what the U.S. government is doing to try to help that. What are the tensions in that relationship? We don't have time for me to tell you all the things I'm interested in, but those are some of them, Lindsay.
So, Jamil, similar question to you then. I mean, Ken just mentioned so many of them, particularly when it comes to China and that suspected spy balloon. What are the questions that senators should be asking here?
Well, Lindsay, obviously this is a rarity. You rarely see public hearings from either the Senate or the House Intelligence Committee. And you rarely see these senior intelligence officials talking on the record. These happen about once a year when these things happen. And so, you know, the questions that senators are going to want to ask, you know, why did we not know about these spy balloons previously in the prior administration, earlier in the Biden administration? Why were we not able to, when we did detect it, why did nobody tell the president for a while? Why did it take so long, all the way from Alaska, all the way down to South Carolina, before we took action? These are all going to be tough questions. I think Ken's right, and Allie's right. You're not going to hear a lot in the public hearing that's new that we're going to find out, but we are going to hear about their view of the level of these threats, right? How important is cyber threats to us in the current environment, right? What does the China threat look like when it comes to Taiwan? Ken raised that point. That's exactly right. And this larger question of what is China doing with Russia? What's that relationship with Russia and Iran? Those with the ongoing war in Ukraine, and what is Iran doing when it comes to these nuclear weapons? Right? Are we going to be able to understand whether they're really enriching to 84% or not, and what does that mean? What's the intelligence community's assessment? We may also hear something about Havana syndrome. Obviously, a lot of senators, Senator Rubio in particular, very concerned about the assessment of Havana syndrome. That's going to come up, and those are going to be some questions asked about that. in the public hearing as well, I think.
Well, given everything that we're talking about, how would you distill this, Jamil, to the top threat facing the U.S. right now and how lawmakers should be responding now?
Well, look, I think, Lindsay, there's no question that China is the number one issue on the agenda for lawmakers. There's a select committee in the House run by Chairman Mike Gallagher. That's going to be top of the mind for everybody. It's going to be top of the mind for the intelligence officials, because the reality is that this China situation could turn hot at any moment, right? If they come across the straits into Taiwan, or if the situation with them supplying weapons to Russia becomes a real thing. I think that's what lawmakers should be concerned about. It's the long-term threat, but it's also the most immediate and most urgent thing that we need to know about as a nation, and that the American public needs to be educated about and understand the very real challenge that we face with the Chinese Communist Party.
All right, we'll be monitoring that now, and throughout the day, we'll bring you any major updates. Ali Vitale, Ken Delaney, and Jamil Jaffer, thanks for starting us off. And everybody stay close. We're going to be watching this hearing as it's about to get underway.